Well, hello everybody. I just want to do an update real quick on the Lifan KPR 200. I found out that's the appropriate way to pronounce it, so I guess I'll stick with that. I may slip up and call it a Lifan because that's what I'm used to, but here's what I've got. So as you know, I bought it during the quarantine, put it together. Didn't take a whole lot, but it took a little bit of work. Changed the fluids. I ended up changing the oil. I changed the radiator fluid. I put in a new spark plug. I went with an X-ring chain on it. I changed out the clutch lever, brake lever, changed out the exhaust to the official Lifan racing exhaust. A couple things I've had to do though that I didn't expect to do, but I've had to go through and put some Loctite on a couple of the bolts here and there, specifically the ones that have to do with the ignition. Now underneath here on the left side and the right side are bolts coming up into the ignition. What happened is, with vibration and time, because this shakes a whole lot, and I have some videos where I was riding on the highway, you can see my camera mount right there. It shakes pretty violently. This bike, there's nothing smooth about it. It really likes flat, smooth surfaces, but at higher speeds, if you have a few ripples on the highway, it is going to give you a little jitter. A lot of feedback through the triple tree up there. And one of the bolts actually fell out while I was doing about 70. I thought I hit something, and I heard, you know, the telltale tink, tink, tink as it flopped underneath the bike. When I got home, my key was about 1.5 inches deeper into the triple tree. It was down there. So the key was actually, this was touching here. So I knew something was going on. I reached down there and there was one bolt barely hanging on. I had to change out those two bolts. I went with stainless bolts with lock washers this time because they were just standard bolts, and I put the blue Loctite on it. Put it on there, let it sit a minute, put them in, and it's pretty solid. Now as far as mileage on this bike, I am up to 277 miles. Gas mileage has been okay. I do ride it at the higher end of the RPMs, so I haven't calculated the mileage yet, but it's not near as good as it's you know, listed, but that's okay. So little issues here and there. I have had to tighten a few things. I have found that several of the bolts on it, when you get to them, do look like the screws are stripped out. I have found that on the windshield here, it is starting to crack. Now remember, on the inside of that one is where it already was cracked right there. And that crack has opened up a little bit. So I'm gonna have to back the pressure out of that, because as you can see, and I thought, as I ride the bike and this flexes under the pressure, that does crack more. So that's something that does bother me a little bit, because I don't want that to break off and then this whole side flap in the wind. I have also found that almost every time you take it out, you should adjust your mirrors. That's pretty much standard on several bikes, but this one in particular, because the mirrors, they do move, and if you get going speed and it shakes and it rattles, these mirrors will turn down on you. So I keep looking for mirrors that'll fit this bike that are a different style, because I'm kind of tired of that, where they vibrate out of place fairly quickly. I did find also that the reservoir back here, filling it with the radiator fluid, is a must, because this bike kept sucking it down. Even though I found that it was full in the radiator, it keeps wanting to pull it out of that reservoir. So I keep feeding it a new higher end 150,000 mile radiator fluid as opposed to what came in it. I can also tell you the radiator fluid that came in this bike is a lot thicker. It's more, has a better oily property to it. And the bike actually runs cooler. Where the fan came on almost every time you started the bike and ran it for short periods, very rarely does the fan even come on now. I just rode it, had another issue that I want to go over. It was getting really hard to get into neutral. At first, when I bought the bike, it was really hard to get into 5th and 6th gear. When I changed the oil to the Mobil 1 4T Racing, that's really good oil. It did shift a lot better into 5th and 6th gear, but I started to get where 2nd gear would not, it would go 1, 2, Second gear, there was no neutral in between, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I had to go in and do the appropriate tension. You can see that was already loosened up, and I tightened it just the other day. There's going to be a massive amount of vibration in this triple tree. I have the appropriate air pressure in that front tire, and you can see where the shocks compress all the way up to there, into turns, or if you hit a pothole, or if you're just leaning on that front suspension. To get it to go into neutral, of course, I had to tighten this up a little bit more. Remember, I have adjustments in here. This can make it tighter. This can actually make it looser. I ride on a 2. I brake on a 1 over here on this adjustable that I added. But this bike says neutral. What gave me the problem the other day is where it said it was in neutral, I started it and the bike jumped out from under me. Didn't have my hand on the clutch. It thought it was in neutral. It was actually in first or second gear. So watch out for that, because that light was false. Now you can see I just rode it. Did have a little bit of hesitation on start. It is pretty hot out here today, but the oil is warmed up. You can hear that the exhaust is really broken in now, which is great, because the factory exhaust was very quiet. This one has broken in nicely. It's got a little patina on the pipe down here, so it's a little bit gold. Looks good. The end of the pipe, not a lot of carbon on it. The brakes have been really good. It's just tightening down bolts. Now, I haven't had to tighten any bolts down on the exhaust because I replaced it, and when I did, I put Loctite, lock washers, and lock nuts on everything that I could. So, like I said, the only issues I've had so far, really besides doing some updated maintenance, key on this too, I changed the spark plug, changed it with the exact same kind of spark plug that came in it, but I found that where the one that came out of it was gapped at a 0.03, this one had to be gapped at a 0.08, which is what they're supposed to be at. So I was way under gapped. So that was part of my issue, where I had some little nagging things like at stoplights. It would want to die on me whenever I started to pull away from the stoplight, and I couldn't figure it out. Well, come to find out, my spark was a little bit off. So it runs a lot smoother. It actually runs smoother at higher RPMs, I found too. So that could be the motor just breaking in. Still don't have a plate for it, because in Texas, they still are not letting, at this point in time, individuals register vehicles in person. And I can't do it online because I have, what is it, an MCO, Manufacturer Certificate of Origin, as opposed to trading a regular tag or title that you would have. So, little things here and there. It's got to do with mainly the nuts and bolts of it. Be sure and check everything. The next thing that I'm gonna check, that I did when I got it and I'm gonna recheck, are the torque specs on the bolts that of course go for the wheels, because I would hate that to loosen up on me. But I checked those, I checked the bearings. So far so good. Always ride with helmet, gloves, everything else. Yeah, it may not be a full power bike, but you should be in full specs for safety. Any questions or anything? I've had some people ask me where I got it. Powersportsmax.com. I called them again when I bought it. I got somebody answer the phone, answer my questions, what colors they had in stock, what they had available, when I would get the MCO in the mail. They answered all my questions. They got it to me. They emailed me to check, make sure everything I'd gotten with the bike was good. I had good customer support with it. Again, when you get it, change all your fluids. Go ahead, order your spark plugs, change out the chain. You know, you're only talking about maybe $200 in parts on a $2,000 bike. So you spend $3,000 with your accessories and fixing everything up, and you'll have a pretty good city bike. I don't know that it would be really good for long distance. I think that's what's kind of loosened a lot of the bolts on it, is running around in the city. I don't get near as much vibration as when I'm banging 8,000 RPMs on it at 70 miles an hour. Our speed limit is 75. It'll do it. It just begrudgingly does 75 right now. So any questions, or if I come up with more issues, I will let you know. Otherwise, I'll keep riding it till I'm ready to sell it. Maybe get a bigger bike one day. Have a great day, everybody.